Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, our off-season YouTube show that focuses on Notre Dame football. We've got a lot of recruiting news to talk about tonight, portal shopping. We're going to focus on those two areas, but we'll get to some other topics as well. We might even break into song, who knows? But we will take your questions, so go ahead and start filling up the question portal. And Tyler will give you a quick tutorial on how to do that, and then off we go.
Yeah, hopefully this isn't too boring for our repeat viewers who are YouTube professionals, but if you don't know how to submit a question, please do so either on the YouTube website or app. Make sure you click through to YouTube so you're on there, not just on our message board or on the InsideNDSports.com website. And if you are on a desktop, you should be able to comment to the right side of our talking voices. And if you're on a mobile device of some sort, there should be a chat box below that you can see that. You should be able to see the comments or questions submitted by Frank Sarah, and then the one that I have put under our own account from LDL Go Irish on the Insider Lounge. So we are open to getting to your questions throughout the show, so please send them in to us, and we will fit them in as we sort of see fit that sort of aligns with some of the things that we're talking about. But we want to talk as much about things that you guys want to listen to as possible. So feel free to give us some suggestions or ideas that we can go and sort of roll with. But we will get started with sort of the news from the last week. And the biggest news, Eric, is Antonio Carter II from Rhode Island. So tell us a little bit about him.
Antonio Carter II was our podcast guest earlier this week.
Yes.
So he gets bonus points for that. He's a 6'1", 200-pound, soon-to-be Rhode Island, University of Rhode Island graduate. He actually graduates this weekend. He'll have 2 years of eligibility at Notre Dame, up to 2 years. He's played corner and he's played safety at Rhode Island. He can play the nickel. He's a pretty versatile defensive back. Came out of high school as a 5'10", very thin defensive back with 0 stars, had no FBS offers. He had close to 30 as a transfer, and he picked Notre Dame over Ole Miss, Wisconsin, LSU, and Florida. And his story about LSU is pretty entertaining. I'll let you relate that story that he shared with us on the podcast.
Yeah, so on his last day of his visit on Friday, he was supposed to leave Notre Dame's campus, and LSU had arranged for a car service to pick him up from Notre Dame's campus and take him to the airport to start his official visit to LSU. And while the car was on campus waiting for him, he decided, you know what? We're going to stay at Notre Dame. I'm going to commit here, stay with my parents. We're going to hang out on campus longer, and I'm going to wrap up my recruitment. So Notre Dame had the pleasure of informing the car service that it would not be needed to take Antonio Carter to its campus, or to LSU's campus. And so that was sort of an interesting twist for that. I'm sure folks who harbor bad feelings for Brian Kelly enjoyed that little addition to the story there. Certainly LSU gets to laugh a little bit of its own, getting Logan Diggs onto its roster as a transfer portal addition from Notre Dame. But I think all of us who follow Notre Dame football are always looking for a little bit of back and forth between Notre Dame and LSU. So that was an interesting wrinkle to the rivalry that doesn't really exist, but besides maybe the fans of the two teams that like to maybe talk down about each other.
Well, it's interesting because had he gotten in the car, gotten on the plane, he would have been taking his visit at the same time Logan Diggs was visiting LSU. So they would have had something to talk about. And instead, he was talking to us on Tuesday. Didn't make the Florida visit either. That was scheduled. I really like this addition. Obviously, whenever somebody's taking a step up in competition, you have questions. You wonder, okay, if he's going to be playing safety full time and hasn't done that in a couple of years. He's been more of a corner lately. Is that going to be an adjustment? I mean, I think everybody has an adjustment when they come to Notre Dame. If it had been Peyton Bowen coming out of high school, he would have had an adjustment.
Right.
Even Kyle Hamilton had an adjustment, although on his very first practice, he had an interception, but he had things to learn. He wasn't a starter his freshman year. He played a lot in packages. So, but I really like this addition because you not only get him for this year, you get him for next year. You've already got 3 established safeties. This gives you a 4th to play in a rotation, creates some cushion in case you have injuries. And Notre Dame had lots of injuries at safety. They had both their freshmen either missed all or parts of spring practice. Their grad transfer nickel, who can play safety, Thomas Harper from Oklahoma State, missed all of spring practice. So getting a depth piece who can also be a frontline piece. I really like this move. And I liked his personality. I loved kind of how ambitious he was to get out of his comfort zone and come to Notre Dame. He's a guy that wants to eventually go to med school after football's over, but he wants to have a run at the NFL and figures Notre Dame is the best place for him to try to launch that part of his career.
Yeah, and I think not only the transfer in levels, but the transfer in positions is interesting, from moving from cornerback to safety. How does he fit in as a safety? He told us that he spent time playing safety early in his Rhode Island career before he sort of broke out as a player, as a cornerback. And when you watch his film, you see him. He's a physical player. He seems to tackle well. And that's not just like based solely on his highlights. I looked up his Pro Football Focus tackling grade from last season. He was graded as a 78.6, which put him between Jalen Sneed and Xavier Watts in terms of the tackling grades that Notre Dame's players received last season.
And Watts is high. I mean, that's a good grade.
Sneed and Watts were 7th and 8th on Notre Dame's roster last season, and that includes some guys that didn't necessarily have as many tackling opportunities, including Jalen Sneed himself on the defense. So I think that's a pretty solid grade. That's better than everyone in Notre Dame's secondary last season, other than Houston Griffith and Tariq Bracy. So I think we're talking about a pretty sure tackler. I think maybe people would raise their eyebrows a little bit when you say Houston Griffith as a tackler there, but I think Houston Griffith's pursuit was maybe more of an issue than his tackling once he got to the point of the contact there.
Houston Griffith was a guy that was fundamentally sound. He didn't make plays. He wasn't a playmaker. He wasn't going to force a fumble. I mean, Antonio had, I think, a couple of fumbles forced last year, a couple of fumble recoveries, had an interception, 10 pass breakups, which is a lot.
Yeah,
it's kind of Julian Love kind of numbers. So,
yeah, so I think it's definitely a worthwhile addition. We'll see what that looks like in the mix for Notre Dame and its safety group. There's not a ton of there's experience there, but not a ton of like playmaking experience there. So I think the possibility that he could bring some playmaking to that group is an added bonus and something that makes that group better. They don't have to rely on the trio of guys who have played as much. And so all 4 of those guys, I think, will play quite a bit. And then you talk about Thomas Harper as well as a nickel back that can play some safety in addition to that. So I think there's a good mix of safeties that Notre Dame should feel a bit better about its safety position than it did as it exited the spring.
So we'll reset the roster for you. There's 82 scholarship players right now, meaning Notre Dame could add up to 3 more players. Let me ask you, Tyler, do you think they'll even add 1 more?
If you just said 1, I would say yes. I mean, I have no idea who that would be at this point, but 1 is a low enough number that I would just take a flyer on that. I do think that there's a chance that Notre Dame will still add someone. I don't think the door is fully closed yet. A fully closed door. So I think there's a possibility. Obviously, the window is shrinking in terms of amount of time you have between now and when things get rolling with guys on campus in June. But I still think there's a possibility that Notre Dame could make another addition there. And I don't know that we would know much about it until that player visits Notre Dame, and then we start to get more wind of it. And if Notre Dame could potentially close on getting a commitment from that person, then I think we would be able to report more on that. But at this point, I don't have a name that I can give you as this guy's going to end up being a future Notre Dame player that's in the portal right now. But I think Notre Dame will continue to evaluate its options and it won't sort of sit on its hands if it sees someone that is a fit for Notre Dame, both academically and athletically, and what the roster needs coming up in this next season.
Right. So I think we talked about this a little bit last week, but we may have shifted our thinking now that they actually did land a safety. So what other positions, if you're Marcus Freeman, are you maybe most interested in? And let's say this is somebody that's at least able to be in a playing rotation, if not, kind of challenged to be a starter.
Yeah, the positions that I'm most interested in would be defensive tackle, running back, and tight end. I don't know that you absolutely need anyone at those spots. I think defensive tackle is first by a bit of a margin, in my opinion. And then you could go on to those other positions. But that's how I sort of see it. What do you think, Eric? And do you agree with me that you would bet that they would still add one more player before things are said and done?
I think that they're certainly going to try. I think interior defensive line makes the most sense, not because you don't necessarily have numbers, but you have a lot of unknown guys. Gabe Rubio, man, he looks the part, and he started to get some high leverage snaps last season.
Right.
And then you have this surprise out of nowhere in Jason Anye. And sometimes there's, a spring ascender that doesn't carry over to the fall, and waiting till late July, August is too late to figure out if that's real.
Right.
And then you also, is Tyson Ford going to take off here soon? Is Aiden Kiana, is he a option to give you? We all know at some point the younger Heinisch is going to be a factor, but I don't think he's at a heavy snap point. And you like the starters, Howard Cross and Ryan Mills, but you're really almost one injury away from kind of being in crisis. If you lost either Cross or Mills for an extended period of time, I think that would be tough. So I do like the interior defensive lineman. From there, I could see, I'm not as much on tight ends as you are, especially after talking to Cole Kmet today, who gave everybody a wonderful grade. He thought they were all great athletes. So I said, even with them being injured, he goes, I can tell. So, so he was on campus this past spring. I've got a story coming on Friday on him going back to get his degree. So, so the other place I would probably look at a wide receiver if there was somebody like, what was Michigan State's receiver's name who picked
Keon Coleman.
Keon Coleman picked Florida State. There was somebody of that caliber out there. I would take a look at them and try to get them on campus for a visit. And then I would say, it would really have to be, if I would buy into the tight end if you are concerned about the recoveries of Eli Reardon and Kevin Bauman. If you said, boy, I'll tell you, 2 ACLs, maybe they're a little bit slower, and there's nothing to indicate they are, but if there's some kind of setback, Eli's had 2 in a very short period of time,
right? And
it's the same knee. Then maybe I would look at that. Same thing if you're concerned about Jadarian Price. If he's not just about 100% as you're going to start summer school, then maybe you take a flyer on a running back that could be a backup. You're not looking for somebody to start there. You have your starter in Audric Estime.
Yeah, wide receiver probably belongs on my list as well. If there's a fit there, I think you have the room to add another guy there. So I think there are options there. Hello to the Golden Playbook. We are doing well. We appreciate you joining us, and we appreciate those of you submitting questions. Please continue to do so, and we will get to them here shortly. I just think the running back spot, the running back and tight end, I think both of those are they are injury related in my opinion. It's like you feel confident about the recoveries of those guys, even if you do, and you have the opinions of the training staff and the doctors that are working with those guys, but they can't guarantee that those guys aren't going to get re-injured. It's not, and it might not be related to them having injuries in the past. And maybe someone else gets injured, and then you have to elevate one of those guys that maybe isn't playing at his best because he is coming back from an injury. So I just think that both of those possibilities are why I wouldn't close the door on adding either a running back or tight end if you find a fit. It's not going to change my outlook on Notre Dame's season going into the season, whether they do or don't add someone at those positions. But I think that's just maybe because you have the extra scholarships, you can play around and if you see a fit at those spots, then I think it would be worthwhile to addressing those potential holes.
Yeah, Kevin Bauman's been injured twice. I forgot about that. He had a broken leg, I think, in the 2021 season. It may be in the opener.
Yeah, it was a Florida State game.
Right, and was out most of the season. So he's missed a lot. Those are both really talented guys. If they're both healthy and you bring somebody in, they better be ready to compete because you'll have a lot of tight ends on the roster and a lot of tight ends that can play, which is kind of what Notre Dame stands for. So, okay. And Tyler mentioned Logan Diggs landed at LSU. He had visited Ole Miss in South Carolina. I think he's thrilled to be at LSU, although he's got a lot of competition. They have a lot of bodies in that running backs room. I was talking to somebody down there about the situation, and I said the one thing about Logan Diggs is you can count on him. If he's healthy, he's a guy that doesn't get nervous in big games. He's a guy that performs well when the lights are bright and so forth. So we'll see if he can work his way through the numbers game there. But there are a lot of running backs, and so we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, there are guys there, but there's no like the guy necessarily or that's had a history. And I think there's some injury histories with some of those guys too. So, I mean, Jaden Daniels, the quarterback, was LSU's leading rusher last season. So as long as LSU felt that there was a need for Logan Diggs, it made the most sense that he would end up there. And LSU gave him the green light and added him to its roster for next season. So it'll be fascinating to see what comes of his career down there, what kind of success awaits him, because I think he would have had plenty of success at Notre Dame and in a combination with Audric Estime going into this coming season.
Before we move on to recruiting, is there anything that we need to get to from the question portal?
Yeah, we can answer some of these questions. Frank Sarah was about tight end, so we may have touched on it a little bit, but with injuries at tight end and not knowing if Eli or Kevin will be healthy, why doesn't Notre Dame move Michael Carmody to tight end? I don't see Notre Dame getting a portal tight end. Your thoughts?
They could certainly use him in some goal line situations. He's, I think, around 280. I mean, he's pretty light for either a guard or a tackle right now. He was competing for the starting guard spot. It seemed like at the very end of spring, they moved him back to tackle. That's, I think, where we have him in our depth chart. I mean, I think he actually filled that role in a game or two. And also Joe Alt did that at the very beginning of his freshman year. So I could see that. I don't know that he plays there a lot, gets a lot of reps there, but in certain packages, I mean, he's not probably in the top two at any position right now. So that would be a role that I could see exploring.
Yeah, and his potential to get into the starting lineup for Notre Dame was at guard, and it seems like he's fallen out of that right now. And so the problem with Michael Carmody always has been a little bit of health, and then also like, is he big enough to play guard? And so those two things sort of work against each other. Are you trying to be big enough to play guard, or you want to play tight end? You can't. I don't know. You could try to do both of those things at the same time. So you'd have to sort of make that decision that we're not going to use Michael Carmody at guard and find a role for him as a blocking tight end in certain packages. I wouldn't rule it out, but I don't know that it's highly likely. I think there's enough tight ends that are good at blocking in that room. I don't know. Like, those guys are pretty physical.
I think he meant his qualifier was if there were injuries.
Right. Yeah. So I think that I mean, it's not stupid. I wouldn't say that. It's not even unreasonable to suggest that, but I think I don't know that would be high on the priority list. I guess, like, what does Michael Carmody want his career to be? Does he want to be a six offensive lineman tight end Like where does he go from there after that? So I don't really know what you would need. Some sort of commitment from Michael Carmody to see some sort of future for his career if he was committed to do that as well. So I think he's at a bit of a crossroads in his career right now, because I'm not really sure what the path to success or playing time is for him right now. So maybe that would lead to that being a potential possibility.
One thing is he didn't go in the portal when he could have.
Right.
As his brother did. They could have both transferred to Mercer, I guess. So his brother being Robbie, a guard on the basketball team.
The other one here is from LDL Go Irish related to the transfer portal. This is a question from the Insider Lounge, our message board, which if you are not an Inside ND Sports subscriber, we highly recommend you do so. That's where we post our news first, and are available for questions basically at all the times of the day and throughout the week. So if you want to chat with us more than just on our live YouTube show, consider subscribing to InsideNDSports.com and hanging out with us on the Insider Lounge. But anyways, enough of my sales pitch. Post-second transfer portal period, and considering no other players are added through the portal, what are now the top two depth issues on offense and defense now? Has the second portal changed those previous assertions on depth?
Well, certainly quarterback. If they were to lose Sam Hartman, then you're down to two guys that have not thrown a pass in a college football game. Now, if this makes you feel any better, that's what happened in 2015. Malik Zaire gets hurt in game 2. Deshaun Kaiser hadn't thrown a pass in a college game, and Brandon Wimbush was a true freshman, and that was your 1 and 2 quarterback the whole year. And Deshaun Kaiser carried the ball a lot. It wasn't like they protected him either. So it's very similar. They probably would hope to have similar results, but I think having their druthers, they'd just rather have Sam Hartman and not have to figure out if they could have a storybook ending to a bad situation. So quarterback would be my number one concern. And again, you could go shopping for a quarterback in the portal. Notre Dame's at least looked at that, but it's hard to find somebody that wants to transfer to be a backup where they might never play.
Right.
So that's a hard sell. On defense, if the interior defensive line isn't added, I would certainly say that. And if they do add somebody there, I would say maybe the field end spot. I'm still not feeling great about that. I need to see Javonte Jean-Baptiste play better. I've got to see if Nana Asafa-Mensah can really be a starter. And can Brendan Vernon be an August surprise? He's an intriguing player, and maybe he's just ornery enough to work his way into the 2 deep. So that would be my other answer.
Yeah, I would probably agree with you on quarterback, and then I don't know. I keep talking about running back and tight end on offense. I would probably go with tight end for that, just because I think there's a lot of bodies there, but I don't know. There's a lot of proven bodies and a lot of proven healthy bodies, and I think you can make. I think it's sort of splitting hairs between the running back and tight end positions in terms of that. I do think your top end at the running back position is better than your top end at the tight end position. In terms of the two depth concerns defensively, defensive tackle would be at the top of that list, in my opinion. And then I think I would either go defensive end or safety. And so I'd probably lean towards defensive end because I think there are a number of guys there that, like you said, you're expecting them to step up, but I don't know that they're going to do that. And if those two guys don't, who is a serious contender to fill either of those roles? Let's do one more question right now. We were talking a little bit about Sam Hartman, the Golden Playbook. As I think we can go 11-1 this season. Of course, it is not guaranteed, but I think with Sam Hartman, we have a shot. I think we can pull off an upset. So do you guys think that Sam Hartman can lead us to an 11-1 season?
I would say that's in the realm of possibilities. That's not where I have Notre Dame kind of trending right now. I would have to see some other things around Sam Hartman on the team, some of the things that we've been talking about. because Notre Dame is still a team that every year needs to have some unknowns turn out to be pleasant surprises. And they've been a good enough developmental program where that's happened most years. But that's still something I need to see in August before I would push my projection. I think their ceiling could be 11-1. Yeah, I think that's realistic, but
Right.
I'm not predicting that.
Yeah, I think I'm in the sort of the same camp as you there. I think it is certainly within reason that Notre Dame can get there, but I'm not ready to go out on that limb yet that Notre Dame can confidently win all of its other games besides whether it's Ohio State or USC or Clemson. All three of those games are potential tough victories that Notre Dame probably won't be favored in. And can they win those games? You'd like to think when you have the better quarterback, at least you think in those matchups, maybe Notre Dame can have the better quarterback than Ohio State and Clemson, but we don't really know what those quarterbacks at those two programs will be looking like at that point of the season when Notre Dame plays them. It would be hard for Sam Hartman to be better than Caleb Williams, the defending Heisman Trophy winner. But I think that Notre Dame obviously has had advantages on the offensive and defensive lines in some of those recent USC games. So there's a lot of those three games are big headliners, and they're not going to be easy victories. So I think it's hard to go into the season saying, yep, Notre Dame's going to go 11-1 without feeling a little bit more confident based off what we've seen in practices and stuff like that, and seeing the evolution of what this offense looks like, what the defense is going to look like. So at this point in mid-May, I can't necessarily put a lot of faith in Notre Dame going 11-1, but it's certainly not unattainable.
Okay, we're going to move on to recruiting. And before we kind of set the stage there, Tyler's got a story that he's working on for tomorrow that we're going to pump up. So, Tyler, tell us about your story, and then we'll get into the recruiting.
Yeah, there's been a lot of people asking about sort of the talent level of the recruits that Notre Dame has been landing as of late, because Notre Dame has added 8 commitments in the 2024 class since late March. And so I've been taking a closer look at all of those guys and plan to share how I think they stack up in terms of ranking them, who's the best of that bunch, who's maybe the biggest reach of that bunch. And I know the stars aren't necessarily in Notre Dame's favor. We're talking about, or even the rankings for that matter, none of those 8 are rivals 250 players. Only 3 of those 8 are 4-star recruits at this time. But I do think there's a chance that some of those 3-star recruits become 4-star recruits. I think the short list, in my opinion, would be Isaiah Canyon, Teddy Rizak, and Cole Mullins as guys that could end up as 4-stars with the way they play as seniors. But I expect there to be a possibility of a lot of movement with some of these guys that committed to Notre Dame in the spring. So that's why I wanted to maybe weigh in and give my thoughts on what Notre Dame is getting there, and where is Notre Dame truly reaching at this point and running out of options, or are they getting talented players, and are they working ahead of maybe some of the other coaching staffs across the country and some of the analysts that weigh in on rankings and ratings for us?
Right. So right now, Notre Dame has 16 commitments in the 2024 class, 1 in the 2025, Davion Dixon, a defensive tackle from Miami. But we're going to focus on the 2024 class here. That's the number 2 class right now in the team standings. And what does that mean in May? It means you're off to a decent start. And I think based on who Notre Dame has coming in, and we'll talk about that in a little bit in June for official visits, I think that there's some things to feel pretty good about. But let's talk about the last 2 commitments that have happened since our last show. So let's start with 3-star linebacker Teddy Rizak. Why do you think that Notre Dame felt like this was a good addition to the class?
Yeah, Teddy is an interesting story because Notre Dame was only his second Power 5 offer. Notre Dame was in on him before in-state Nebraska was. You would think that Nebraska, of all places, wouldn't let Nebraska prospects get out of the state. It's not like you're in Georgia where there's just so much talent that you can't necessarily bring all the talent in. But Notre Dame liked what it saw in Teddy Rizak as it was evaluating Christian Jones, a 2025 linebacker that Notre Dame has already offered. And Teddy Rizak played some outside linebacker. He played some safety. Notre Dame sees him as a potential rover out of the gate, and then with the potential to grow into an inside linebacker. I think that's a smart trajectory to recruit linebackers with athleticism. I think you want that, and then you can always make those guys bigger in theory, as long as they have the frame for it. It's easier to get those guys bigger, and then when they do get bigger, the speed difference isn't that big of a deal when you're talking about a guy that's maybe maxed out in terms of his growth and is playing a linebacker at a high level in high school. Sometimes you can get guys that maybe just aren't quite ready to take that next step to the college level. So I like that with Teddy Rizak and the ability to grow there. He is a versatile player. He's a playmaker. So he's very Drew Tranquill-ish, in my opinion. I think I see a lot of similarities there in a guy that now Drew Tranquill was recruited as a safety and started his career at Notre Dame as a safety, but I think we saw that the best path forward for him was at linebacker, and he's made a career in the NFL at that.
And the best path forward was when he wasn't playing for Brian Van Gordon.
Well, as is the case for most Notre Dame defenders during that era. So I think that I think there's something to like there. I understand why he's not a 4-star recruit. I can see some skepticism there in terms of what will he be eventually, but I see the vision that Notre Dame has for him, and I think there's something to that. So I like the addition, and I think he has the potential to be a real contributor at Notre Dame throughout his career.
Okay, and then the other guy that committed recently was 4-star linebacker Bodie Cahoon from Roanoke, Virginia. What can you tell us about Bodie?
Yeah,
other than the fact he doesn't let recruiting analysts know that he's committing.
yeah, that he likes to commit very early in the morning. Fortunately, Charleston Bulls was awake and at the gym when Bodie Cahoon decided to announce his commitment early in the morning, and I was in bed, and you guys had already sorted all that out before I even woke up. So yeah, Bodie is more of an inside linebacker than Teddy Rizak at this moment. He's similar in that he's very athletic. He's a lacrosse player. He was an Ohio State lacrosse commit. So a good lacrosse player at that. I haven't found a natural comparison for Bodie Cahoon yet in terms of a former Notre Dame player that I would align him with, but
if he was a tight end, we could say Will Yateman because he played lacrosse too.
There you go.
I mean, for Notre Dame, not just in high school.
So I think I like him as well. I'm not sure that I see the same sort of potential upside in Bodie Cahoon as I do in Teddy Rizak. I think you sort of know what you're getting with Bodie Cahoon, whereas there's sort of the allure of the unknown with Teddy Rizak that I think there maybe is the difference between the two. But I think they're both potentially good contributors for Notre Dame, guys that can play for multiple seasons in Notre Dame's defense. And if Cahoon maybe gets too big and doesn't play linebacker, maybe he ends up being a Viper. We've seen that before on a lot as of late for Notre Dame with the Vipers on its current roster. I think you'd like to be in a better position with recruiting Vipers, so you don't have to necessarily do that as much. But I think that maybe there's a path down that road for Bodie Cahoon. Now, maybe I'm just thinking too much of like Sam Hubbard, who was a former Notre Dame lacrosse commit who ended up at Ohio State and being a very good defensive end. So I think that it's another good get at the linebacker position. I still think that Notre Dame has its sights set on maybe some guys with more potential at linebacker to fill out its class, but I think you have two guys that I think are probably going to be reliable players for you throughout their Notre Dame careers. Definitely special teams guys, probably early in their careers. And I can sort of see what Al Golden liked in those guys and why they had the green light to commit at this point.
So let's kind of take a look at the big picture here. Overall, I don't want you to give away too much of what you're writing about tomorrow, but I mean the 16 players. Do you feel like Notre Dame is on a trajectory to have enough talent in this class, or do you think that there are just a lot of, I don't want to say reaches, but a lot of, I don't know, unknowns, a lot of guys that are projected to be good, but haven't yet shown the production or don't have the body type yet.
Yeah, I mean, however you want to call them, I think it's for a number of them, depending on the position you're talking about, whether it's safety. I think you're talking about a lot of plan B guys. Like they weren't guys that Notre Dame has been going from the jump. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't end up being just as good as those guys that Notre Dame offered early on. But you're looking at more of projection players, guys that are late risers in their high school careers. And so you are taking maybe a little bit more of a risk when you're having to settle for those guys than you were if you felt like these guys that you knew from early on, whether they were sophomores in high school, that these are the guys that we want to prioritize at safety, whether that's like a Peyton Woodyard or a Mike Matthews. Those are guys that Notre Dame really like that are borderline 5 stars, are 5 stars based on the rankings that Notre Dame liked a lot early, but wasn't able to get them. So Notre Dame is like going to sort of backup plans here. That doesn't mean you can't end up with good players as backup plans. I mean, Audric Estime and Logan Diggs were backup plans at the running back position for Notre Dame, and I think they're pretty good college football players. So I think it's a test of what Notre Dame's evaluation skills are and what they can see in projecting these new round of guys that they're offering. But there still are those elite guys that they're going after, whether it's a Justin Scott, Elijah Rushing, Kingston Viliamu Asa. There are guys that are very talented. Logan Thomas, a defensive end. He's actually going to be on campus this weekend for an unofficial visit and plans to return for an official visit in June. So things are going well for Notre Dame there. A highly ranked 4-star defensive end. So there's still those top-end guys. Gerby Lambert as an offensive tackle. There are a lot of those top-end guys that are still out there for Notre Dame. I think you want to see Notre Dame close on more of those guys than some of these Plan B guys. And that will sort of probably dictate what this class looks like come signing day. Does it have a chance to stick in the top 5, or is it a back end top 10 team, a team that's fighting to stay in the top 10? I think those are the recruitments that'll really dictate how things sort of shake out for Notre Dame, because they have taken some of these guys already that maybe stay in the 3-star range, but I think we're still, those guys still have a whole nother college or high school football season to play. So there's plenty of movement in the rankings that can still happen as well.
Yeah, I think everybody gets 3 stars. There's people that they like, that they want to take. It's not always, a default position. And I did a story last week about what can happen when 3 stars click. I'll just give you a few numbers from that. Mm-hmm. There may be as many as 9 starters on this year's team that were former 3-star products, and that includes left tackle Joe Alt, who's an All-American. We looked at the Rivals era from 2002 to the present, just people that have exhausted their eligibility. 16 of them have gone on to be NFL draft picks. There was actually a 2-star Mike Richardson who was drafted too. And then I'll give you the top 5. I ran the top 15, but the top 5 from 5 to 1. 5 was Ryan Harris, a 4-year starter at offensive tackle who played in the NFL. Ian Book was number 4. Jeff Samardzija, wide receiver and major league pitcher, number 3. People that, are a little bit closer to Tyler's age might not remember him as an All-American, consensus All-American wide receiver. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, a unanimous All-American, should have been a first-round draft choice, won the Butkus Award, and then number 1 was Tyler Eifert, a 2-time All-American tight end and first-round draft choice. So, again, it can click, and then there's a lot of 3-stars that you kind of go, why did they ever recruit them? So that's just a little bit of a reminder there. But you were talking about
Hold on. For the record, Jeff Samardzija is only 4 years older than me, so I know plenty about Jeff Samardzija, and okay. I would hope Notre Dame fans do as well. I had the added bonus of he actually played in my high school's conference in the Duneland Athletic Conference, being that he was from Valparaiso and I was from LaPorte. So I saw Jeff Samardzija playing at a high school level before I even had any idea that he would end up being a Notre Dame wide receiver.
Well, I was talking to somebody in their 20s the other day, and they did not know much about his football career.
Well, I'm sad to tell you, Eric, that I've left my 20s in the past, so you can't think of me
I
as
know,
a 20-year-old
I know
anymore.
exactly how old you are because you're about 10 days younger than my oldest son. So, and yet you project more as the dad on this show. So, anyways, so when we're looking at the June visits, and I'm really jealous that you have Kingston's last name down better than I. I pride myself on those Polynesian names, and I have not gotten into rhythm.
You just got to stare at yourself in the mirror and practice, Eric.
He is KVA to me.
Viliamuasa.
Viliamuasa. Okay. I will practice in the mirror tonight because I want to say it as well as I say Kiana Aina.
You can just call him King too. Just shorten his first name while you're at it. Just call him King.
Well, I'll tell you, when I was covering basketball, I did an interview with a guy named God. And I
was that like, God Shamgod?
Yeah, it was God Shamgod from Providence. So it's like, well, God. So it's like, God. So anyways, so what might change in June? I mean, you've been putting together this visitors list, and as I'm looking it over, I see a lot of top 250 players and 4-star players. So how do we think June might go for Notre Dame?
Yeah, I mean, June was going to be sort of a barometer in terms of where this class is going, where Notre Dame can finish at certain positions of need that it still has. How are things going to shake out for Notre Dame on the offensive line when Styles Prescott and Gerby Lambert are expected to come in for official visits? Can they add both or one of those guys to the class? Where's Notre Dame going to end up at defensive end with Elijah Rushing and Logan Thomas getting on campus this summer? Obviously, Kingston Viliamuasa is a big key to what the future of Notre Dame's linebacker group is. They have some other guys, Keyshawn Flowers, Chris Cole, that are expected to visit, that are potential linebackers for Notre Dame. So the safety position is sort of up in the air. Like, how many are they going to take? Who are those guys that they're going to be? I think there's a lot of still uncertainty and there's still a lot of room, even though there's already 16 commitments. I think they're gonna at least get to 25. I would at the rate that Notre Dame's going to lose guys to the transfer portal and the rate that Notre Dame's not going to be able to replace those guys via the transfer portal, I think Notre Dame's going to have to be aggressive in signing full classes on the recruiting trail. So I think that we'll probably see that in this recruiting cycle. I think Notre Dame will make choices in certain cases, like Notre Dame has 3 wide receivers. It's still trying to figure out, should we take a 4th receiver? Do we want to add a 4th receiver to the class? Do we want to wait to see how the rest of the other positions work out? Is it better to take 4 safeties or 4 receivers? I think those are some of the questions you have to sort of figure out. And the month of June will allow Notre Dame to get more information to inform those decisions. Where does it stand with some of its top end guys? What are the positions it needs to continue to evaluate and maybe add some more players? And how does it feel with where things are heading? So I think June will be and I think that's sort of the case across college football. This isn't necessarily unique to Notre Dame. June is a pretty defining month in terms of where things stand, because that is like the big official visit month of the summer. Official visits in the summer have almost become a bigger deal than official visits during the season. Notre Dame even gets its commits on campus with their official visits during the summer rather than waiting for the season.
The weather here is breathtaking in June, though.
Right. It makes sense. Yeah. And if Notre Dame was starting its season, I mean, it is still playing Ohio State at the end of September, but if it was starting the season in the first couple games playing against Ohio State, maybe you would be a little bit less likely to host some guys during June, but you know what it's going to be like on campus in June. And so you feel very confident of what the presentation will be like, and you can get more guys on campus for that. And so that you can sort of create this special environment for those official visitors. The attention is on them rather than there also being a game going on. So I think that it's a good opportunity and it's a good strategy the way Notre Dame has sort of played it and planned it. It was successful for Notre Dame in the last recruiting cycle. And obviously, if you get those commitments, you still have to hold on to them through the end, which wasn't necessarily the strength in the last recruiting cycle, but Notre Dame is working to put itself in a strong position to finish strong with this 2024 class.
Okay, before we pick off some recruiting questions from the viewers, I'll ask you one, and it's maybe a little bit of a trick question. Will Notre Dame end up with any 5-star prospects?
I'll say yes. Your probably best bet is CJ Carr becoming a 5-star recruit,
right?
Because he's already in the class. But there's no guarantee. We can't predict how their analysts are going to see CJ Carr in 7 months. But I think that he's
on their staff's radar because they've talked about that possibility.
Yeah, and where he's located in the rankings right now. If you're unaware, Rivals doesn't give out all of its 5 stars early. Like, it'll end up with 32 5 stars at the end of the cycle, but it slowly increases that number as it gains more confidence that these number of players are worthy of 5-star status. And so where he's at now is in that top 32, but he's not a 5-star yet. So he has a chance to add there. And so he's your best bet in terms of someone who's committed. I think Cam Williams is another guy that could end up in that 5-star conversation.
If they take his long jump into it.
Yeah. Justin Scott is the 5-star that's still out there that Notre Dame is recruiting they have the best chance of adding. So there's another chance there. I could see guys like Elijah Rushing or Kingston Viliamuasa maybe ended up as a 5-star rushing, probably more likely than KVA based on the position they play. So I do think – so I would – at this point I would say yes. It's definitely not a shoo-in, but I do think that Notre Dame will finish this class with a 5-star signee. What do you think? Do you share that optimism?
I do. I think the way that CJ Carr is progressing, just his size is bigger. I think playing on that 7-on-7 California power team has raised his profile a lot. People have all over the country have gotten to see him. I think he's going to actually be in Chicago, or at least his team has a game in Chicago in early June. So maybe that's something. If he isn't over here being a recruiting host, we can go look at him. Yeah, I feel better good than not about Justin Scott and Notre Dame, but I'm not, I don't have the Ouija board or the crystal ball or whatever we call ours future cast. I kind of like that.
You better like it. You don't have a choice. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, but we don't have any special little props that go with the future cast. It's not a Ouija board, so
we don't have any emojis.
We don't have any emojis, but I like, maybe we could adopt a snake as our emoji. But I like that one. I think Notre Dame is really reinvested in Chicago. I wrote a story about that recently. There's a lot of talent there right now, and I think also Rivals has looked at the Chicago area a little bit differently based on how many kids are able to get to the NFL from Chicago, maybe underrating those kids as high school players. And so there's a lot in the 2025 class as well. There's some really good players in the Midwest. Michigan's got a bunch too. So,
and since we're talking about CJ Carr and Cam Williams, I'm not sure how many times Cam will be on campus in June. I think at least twice. CJ Carr told me he plans to be on campus for all 3 of the official visit weekends. One of those weekends will be his official visit, but he plans to be on campus for both of those other official visit weekends to help recruit. Aneyas Williams plans to be on campus for all 3 of those weekends as well. So we will see Notre Dame's commits also on campus helping add those guys, and especially when they're high-profile guys like CJ Carr, that's really valuable for Notre Dame to have those guys on campus on those weekends.
And they could have Antonio Carter talk about his car service story to all of them.
You mentioned talent in Michigan, so let's get to this question from Joshua Williams. One guy I got to see when watching all those CJ Carr games was Bryce Underwood, a quarterback from Bellevue, Michigan. He's a top 2025 recruit. Does ND have any interest in him?
Plenty of interest in him. I'm not sure how strong the interest is in back. They are still involved in him. One of the 2025s that Notre Dame was courting, Cutter Boley from Lexington, Kentucky. He picked Kentucky today. I would say of the 2025 guys that they are looking at, that there's mutual interest. I would think Deuce Knight would probably be the leading contender, but I think they would be happy with, I think Underwood is probably the best of those quarterbacks, but they're all kind of in the same echelon. Is it KJ Salas down in Alabama?
Lacey,
KJ Lacey in Saraland, Alabama. And then the McIntyre kid in Nashville, whose grandpa used to be the head coach at Vanderbilt. He's in the mix. I would say those four are the most realistic, with Deuce Knight probably, I think, in the lead position at this point. But you get Bryce Underwood on, you get him to take that 3-hour car ride to South Bend, then maybe you're in the game with him.
Yeah, I don't think he's been down to campus as a recruit. So that's not the greatest sign when you're from Detroit and you haven't made an official visit yet. Now maybe Notre Dame can. Notre Dame's been to his school at least twice during this spring evaluation period, so they are making it known their interest in him. I'm not sure that it's been reciprocated, so I think that could be. I would still consider that a long shot at this point, but there is a lot to like about Bryce Underwood, and Notre Dame certainly sees that, as well as many of the top teams in the country do. So we'll see if anything can sort of come of that interest that Notre Dame has in him, and see if that's reciprocated in any way.
Do we got another question?
Yeah, one more recruiting question. I believe this is from Ron Robert. I believe Notre Dame tends to sign a number of offensive linemen and usually get early commits. The 2024 class seems short in this area. Is it because of the present roster or new coach?
A little bit of both. They didn't have anybody leave through the transfer portal. I think Tyler corrected me. I thought that they might go up to 5, and Tyler thinks it's going to be 4. They've already have 2, and they have some good guys coming. I mean, some highly ranked guys coming in June. Guerby Lambert, the Bricks kid from Iowa. Is there somebody else coming in June that's
Styles Prescott? And we actually heard that Grant Bricks does not have a visit scheduled at this point. He still doesn't have a visit scheduled to Notre Dame. Charleston got in contact with Grant, and I confirmed that as well, that there's nothing on the books yet. We'll see if that changes. But that is certainly someone that Notre Dame is interested in on the offensive line position.
So there's 4. There's a couple of kids, I think, in Pennsylvania that they're still looking at. And again, Coach Rudolph didn't get here till the middle of February, and he also had to get ready for spring practice.
Right.
One of the commits that he did get was somebody who was recruiting at Virginia Tech, but not everybody that you're recruiting at Virginia Tech is the caliber that you want to recruit at Notre Dame. And so, he kind of had to look at Harry's list and see who on it he also liked, and who on it maybe that Harry had scratched off that he wanted to get involved with. But, it's hard with some of those guys to get involved with them at this point. I think when you look at the 2025 offers, the few that they have out, there's some really good prospects in that class. So I think it'll get rolling here. But I do think that, Notre Dame was selling legendary Coach Harry Hiestand, and then they had to change their recruiting pitch. So it takes a while to form some chemistry and win guys over.
Yeah, and because of the numbers that Notre Dame brought in on the offensive line the last couple of classes, when you're talking about consecutive 5-player classes, Notre Dame was in a position in this class to be picky with who it wanted to offer and recruit. And so Harry Hiestand was doing that. And then when Harry Hiestand leaves, then you maybe sort of lose some of those connections with those guys you were being picky about. Maybe the guys that he wasn't sold on. Joe Rudolph is more sold on, but you're sort of behind the 8 ball with that. So Notre Dame was playing a little bit from behind in the 2024 class on the offensive line because of the culmination of those events. But there, like we said, there still are a few guys out there that Notre Dame could add that would fill out that class nicely. But Notre Dame is not in a spot where it needs a bunch of offensive linemen in this class because of the numbers and talent that it brought in previous classes.
And I'm going to sneak in a little bit of baseball announcement on Football Never Sleeps. Notre Dame baseball team just knocked off Boston College 5-1 in Brighton, Massachusetts. They play tomorrow in Fenway, then back in Brighton on Sunday. Notre Dame wins one of those last 2 games. I think they're definitely sealed their invitation to the NCAA baseball tournament for the third year in a row. So I'll get off baseball and back to football.
Yeah, that's a good recovery from a bad loss to Northwestern earlier in the week. And like you said, if they maybe win one more, maybe they're pretty much guaranteed to get into the NCAA tournament once again. We don't have any recruiting questions left. We do have some more big picture questions. You want to?
Yeah, let's take those, and then we can jump into a couple other topics if we have some time.
This one just sort of relates to something a little bit, not necessarily, but I think we could sort of squeeze a connection into the fun conversation we wanted to have. Anthony Campbell asks, how committed do you think Notre Dame, Jack Swarbrick, and the athletics department is to Marcus Freeman and him being successful and win a national championship? I feel there were times that they were shady towards Coach Freeman.
I think there's a commitment from the president and the athletic director. I think the biggest hurdle Marcus has right at this point is dealing with the incoming transfer portal. And I think the other Notre Dame coaches are in the same boat, especially men's basketball and women's basketball. I mean, I know a lot of top centers in the country that were very interested in being added to the Notre Dame women's basketball roster that were hard-nosed in admission not because they weren't good students, but because they would be bringing more credits from their school than they would be accumulating at Notre Dame, thus getting a Notre Dame degree with mostly credits of another school. And so that was difficult because there were centers that were exceptional that could have been in that. And Marcus is in the same place. You know, if you're going to lose double-digit guys to the portal, yeah, you can recruit and bring in high school kids, but sometimes you need to plug holes. And if you're just limited basically to grad transfers and some people that have just finished their freshman year, that's a much smaller pool. Stanford is in the same boat. And in women's basketball too. I mean, they're a powerhouse, and they lost some good players through the transfer portal, and they weren't able to get those players back in women's basketball. So it's not just football, but football, it's very visible because of the number of transfers you need. The women's basketball team just needed one. Marcus really could use a few, and this is the most Notre Dame's ever brought in one cycle. I mean, they went several years with just 4, and then all of a sudden they've been having these multiple transfer classes. But still, if you want to compete with the best, you want to be able to get the best players, provided they're a great student. I think that's the biggest hurdle. I don't know where else I think that they've been shady towards Coach Freeman.
I think the offensive coordinator search situation is probably the thing that seems the most awry to people. And I understand. I mean, it was sort of publicly fumbled. I don't know the right way to describe it. It was awkward at best. The way things sort of played out with Andy Ludwig in Notre Dame, and moving on to Jared Parker. So I think people are wondering, who deserves the blame for that? Could Notre Dame have done a better job of putting Marcus Freeman in position to add Andy Ludwig to the staff? And I think that's a fair argument to a certain extent, that it probably should have been able to work out smoother than it did, but it didn't, and Notre Dame moved on. So I think whether it's that, maybe.
Do you think Andy Ludwig really wanted to be here in the end? Do you think he really wanted to be here?
I mean, not with like 100% certainty. No, I mean, otherwise it would have probably worked out. Like if he was like dead set on coming to Notre Dame, he would have been able to. He would have let that Notre Dame figure it out and get on the same page and make sure everything was ironed out. Right. I sort of agree with you there.
I mean, they went out and got. I mean, and they weren't in no position not to do this, but they went out and went after the 2 best, I think, college offensive line coaches out there. The guy from Georgia who's semi-retired or whatever, and then Coach Rudolph, and then you look at men's basketball, and it wasn't they didn't blink at paying a $4 million buyout for Micah Shrewsbury.
Right.
So
I think people wonder, like, if Tommy Rees is leaving Notre Dame for Alabama, is there something wrong with what's going on at Alabama or at Notre Dame? I think, is Notre Dame not paying him enough? I don't think that's necessarily the case. We had heard to the contrary that Notre Dame would pay Tommy Rees whatever they needed to in order to keep him, but he chose to leave. Now, whether or not Notre Dame actually did that rather than say they would do that, those are two different things. But I think there was at least the expressed notion that money wasn't going to separate or prevent Notre Dame from keeping Tommy Rees, and he sort of chose that path to go to Alabama. So I think those are all sort of things when you have staff turnover. Is Notre Dame paying its assistants enough? Are they doing enough? But we're talking about guys that Notre Dame had guys interviewing for NFL jobs. I mean, Notre Dame's coaching staff was sort of under attack in a way in terms of people seeing lots of guys that they liked and trying to hire away. And so that's what Notre Dame had to deal with this offseason. And that means you are hiring good coaches if those are the kinds of things you're dealing with.
I mean, if people thought Tommy Rees was going to stay here forever and wait for Marcus Freeman to retire when he's 80 and then take over the job at that point, that wasn't going to happen. I mean, coordinators that are ambitious, they're going to move on. They're not going to stay, even if it's their alma mater, they're going to move on to, what they think is a better opportunity. I think Tommy Rees will end up in the NFL at some point.
All right, let's get this question from Josh Miller. Hey, guys, love the show. Rarely get a chance to listen live, but keep up the great work. When Notre Dame goes 14-0 this year, how will you celebrate?
I will celebrate by giving a subscription special.
Wow, you heard it here. Eric's promising subscription specials if Notre Dame wins the national championship.
Well, I mean, it's good business for us.
Yeah.
I think people would be in the mood. Yeah, let's
more
subscribe.
Yeah, right.
I'll mow your lawn. I'll shovel your snow.
More subscribers makes us celebrate more than Notre Dame winning the national championship. But I think those two things could go hand in hand. I would celebrate by rating whatever media buffet or drink special that they made available at the national championship game. That would be my way of celebrating as I write my post-game coverage for Notre Dame winning its first national championship of what would be my lifetime if that were the case. So though I am not still in my 20s, I am younger than Notre Dame's last national championship, just barely, but I am. So that I think there'd be a lot of people that would like to see how not only we would celebrate, but how they would celebrate. I think people would sufficiently lose their minds if Notre Dame won a national championship.
Do we want to finish off with questions since we probably don't have time to get into the...
Yeah. Let's just do these last couple questions I have here from the Golden Playbook, who has been sticking around throughout the chat. What do you guys think about Notre Dame's contract with Under Armour expiring, and do you guys think that we will join the Big Ten in the future?
Well, those are totally unrelated, Golden Playbook. I just want you to know that. So put the beer down. No, he didn't. He was just asking a two.
He said not and.
Yeah,
So.
He was just asking a good two-part question. I do that all the time.
Yeah, which you are guilty of.
I'm very guilty of
Marcus
that.
would be like, what was the second question?
Yeah, and even further disparate than what this one is. So what do you guys think about the contract with I mean, for me, it's a shoulder shrug. I think there's other good outfitters. I don't think Under Armour kept its promises. They talked about being on the leading edge of sports science, and I don't think that ever was the case. And I think they have some cool looking stuff, but I don't know that people are really into their shoes and cleats and things like that, that they're the best footwear. Do you think Notre Dame will join the Big Ten? We're going to have our answer in the next 2 years. If Notre Dame's media rights deal is something that puts them close to what the SEC and the Big Ten are getting, then I think Notre Dame can stay independent. Now, here's kind of the back end of that. And I wrote about this a little bit today in the notebook I did with Jordan Cornette. The ACC could implode because they could end up, I mean, they're researching, can they get out of this grant of rights deal that runs through 2036 without paying $500 million to do it? And if the ACC starts getting picked off in realignment and the ACC ceases to be, then Notre Dame will have to find a new home for its basketball teams and Olympic sports teams, which may require football to be all in instead of what the ACC was willing to do of sticking a couple toes into the ACC. So stay tuned. I mean, normally I would say never going to happen. And suddenly it is, I think, realistic, but not probable.
Yeah, I think, and like actually the Golden Playbook had a question about the NBC or TV media rights contract for Notre Dame as well. Obviously, that plays a significant role. Notre Dame needs the money to be competitive in order to continue to be near the top of that arms race. When you look at Notre Dame's revenue created from the football team, it is among the best in the country, and that includes its TV contract. So if Notre Dame can improve its TV contract, then it can maintain its status up there among the top in the country. So I think that is a important part for Notre Dame and its future in terms of its conference alignment. In terms of the apparel deal, I don't know what's going to happen. I wouldn't rule out that Notre Dame sticks with Under Armour. Under Armour as a company hasn't necessarily followed the trajectory that I think Notre Dame thought it would when it signed that deal. I think Under Armour probably thought Notre Dame would sort of help ignite its brand, and even someone like Steph Curry would do that. But I don't. Under Armour hasn't had that sort of worldwide success that I think it maybe thought it was going to have, and is more leveled off than sort of taken off since the Notre Dame, the original Notre Dame contract. I think Notre Dame will be interested in figuring out what's available to it. I think fans are just most interested in the cool stuff that they can wear, like what you can buy as a fan, and how the product or the apparel line does in that venue. I think that's probably of the least concern for Notre Dame. They're interested in what their players can get, in sort of what ways can this apparel deal help Notre Dame on the NIL space. I think is an intriguing aspect of it, which isn't necessarily something you would consider, but Notre Dame does, and all universities moving forward have to sort of take that into account. And so I think those are all things that'll weigh into this, whether Notre Dame ends up sticking with Under Armour or signing with someone like Nike or Adidas. Those seem to be the three most likely outcomes, but we'll see how that sort of plays out. And then lastly, from the Golden Playbook, would you guys rather Notre Dame stay with NBC or do something new, like maybe moving to ESPN?
I think with them having the Big Ten and having other college football program actually will help NBC. I'm okay with being on NBC as long as there's good announcers. It doesn't affect us as much as it affects you guys, because we're generally not watching the NBC games. We're at the stadium. But there's going to be streaming platforms, and maybe there's something better than Peacock, more exciting than Peacock. If they had Amazon Prime, that would be good for me because I have Amazon Prime. And I want to also say, for you that didn't just ask questions, that complimented us, we love that. So Tyler will, if we get enough of those next week, Tyler will sing, or next time we're on, we'll sing a show tune.
I'm singing a show tune, you said?
Well, you're not on next week. That's right. You're on vacation. So I think that's a good place to wrap up.
So long, farewell.
Well, okay. That wasn't too bad, except for the hand motion.
Well, that's how you know it's a show tune, right?
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a preference whether Notre Dame's on NBC or ESPN. I don't really, when I watch games back, which I do watch the games back, I don't like the way Fox does. They don't do a good job with replays, in my opinion. Like my preference as a viewer, which is certainly different from fans at home. Like I want as many different angles of plays as I can get, and I want the analysts to be able to tell me something that I maybe didn't pick up when I watched it live. Now that's different because I'm watching in a completely different perspective. But I think even if I were watching it live, that would be what I'd like to see as a viewer. That's just how I prefer to watch football. I don't know that I'm necessarily the common viewer when it comes to that, as someone who geeks out on football and is a football writer. But I think that So whatever Notre Dame does doesn't really affect me too much. But of the ones that I've seen in terms of its college football presentation, Fox is the one I've liked the least in terms of how it presents its games and does that. Now, what that my vote doesn't really matter. Where Notre Dame ends up it probably won't be due to the presentation. It'll be more due to the dollar signs that come with that contract, and we will see where things land.
Whoever promises not to use Skycam.
Yeah, anti-Skycam. Yeah. All right. Well, that's all we have for you guys this evening. Thanks for everyone.
Promo your story real quick again.
Yeah, so I'm going to have a story tomorrow ranking all of Notre Dame's commitments this spring from the 2024 class. That's 8, so I'll rank them 1 to 8. You can learn more about those guys, see what I think, and give you maybe some insight on what to maybe watch for them as they go into their senior seasons and their potential fit at Notre Dame moving forward. So hopefully that is a story you want to read. Make sure you are an Inside ND Sports subscriber to get access to that. For just under $10 a month, you can do that. And we always have specials going throughout the year. Hopefully you took advantage of the deal we were running last week that was giving you a free trial. But I think you'll enjoy it. You'll enjoy our content. You'll get more to hear from more of us. You'll have access to us on the Insider Lounge 7 days a week. So we hope that you consider doing that and joining our growing community there on the Insider Lounge message board. Thanks for tuning in. We're going into an uncertain schedule here with Eric and I taking some vacation over the next several weeks. But we'll try to, I think it'll likely be myself and Charleston Bowles, our recruiting writer, or Eric and Charleston Bowles, or some other combination of that for both Football Never Sleeps and the Inside ND Sports podcast. But we want to try to get to you guys as much as we can over that time, especially on the recruiting front, because there will be plenty of news to cover in the next month and a half with Notre Dame hosting all kinds of official visitors here in June. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you soon. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, do all those things so we can get in front of more eyes and grow our viewership here as well. Have a good night.